Hello, everyone. This is the Progressive Mind Show. My name is Senna, aka Alinko, and we are coming your way from the studios of Chicago, from the studios of the Progressive Mind Show in Chicago. And we will be in a little bit introducing our guests to you. We're waiting for our audience to come in. This is a show we titled Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and the diaspora. We want to look at how his work has impacted the diaspora, Africa, Ghana, and Africa. And so stay tuned. We shall be right back. We want to take a quick break. When we come back, we will continue the show. This is the Sunday episode of the Progressive Mind Show. We shall be right back. Welcome back to the show. Again, this is the Progressive Minds. We are here to build our community as we engage these fellows who have dedicated their time and work in the areas of African history, culture, not only African and Black history and our culture, our heritage. And so we will be listening. We will be hearing a bit much more from them as it pertains to the work of the only Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and his connection to the African diaspora, his impact on the African diaspora in Ghana and the continent of Africa. Of course, we will also look at how he influenced the Black Jews all the way in Israel. So this evening, we would like you to, this late Sunday afternoon, we would like you all to chime in and be a part of a great conversation. It is May 19th, 2022. It's a beautiful Sunday here in Chicago. And we would like to go to our guest this evening. My co-host, Jonathan Brown, will be joining us very soon. And we'll be introducing him to you as well. But for now, we would like to go to our guest to help us with the discussion this evening. So our first guest on the bill is GAMARIYAHU. He is the founder or a director at the Tri-State Community Development Group, brother who is very, very versed in the information or knowledge of issues concerning the diaspora, Black people, and Africa. Brother, you're welcome to the show, and we're looking forward to a great discussion.
Thank you so much. I'm honored to have the opportunity to speak, and I'm always excited to have the opportunity to be in the presence of such dignitaries and luminaries as Reverend Al Sampson. I'm excited. I also want to mention that he is wearing a very, very clean African top garment, looking quite dapper. For myself, I'm always excited to have the opportunity to speak about the work of Dr. King in the area of conflict reconciliation. I was trained by Dr. Bernard Lafayette who I'm sure Reverend Sampson would probably know quite well, who was also a lieutenant of Dr. King. And what's significant about that is that Dr. Lafayette was charged with institutionalizing the work of Dr. King so that it could be taught at the university level or anywhere. And he completed the task. He developed a conflict resolution center, which is still functioning in University of Rhode Island. And he actually came to DIMONA. I guess the best way for me to broach that subject is to say that he came to DIMONA while I was living there, and he said that he had actually witnessed the beloved community, which was the Village of Peace. He witnessed the idea that Dr. King had so eloquently expressed of the beloved community at work, actually being lived by the residents of the Village of Peace. And I was one of the people that were trained at that time in the. Go ahead.
No, I want to give you some time to get into the work of Dr. King in that part of the world, which is in DIMONA. But for the purposes of time, I would like the other guests to come in and briefly tell us who they are so we can get into the depth of the conversation. Is that okay? All right. Okay, great. So next to him is FIDEL OWUSU. FIDEL is an international geopolitical analyst. He is also an expert on the subject matter in terms of international relations. FIDEL, thank you so much for making it. You are all the way in Ghana, and I know it's about 9 p.m. right now, so we appreciate you making time to be on this show.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm most grateful for this, and it's an honor to be with such eminent co-panelists and yourself. I have been in the security industry for a while. I have also been in the geopolitical analysis of all the 6 geopolitical zones in Africa: Horn of Africa, Central Africa, West Africa, North Africa, and Southern Africa, and East Africa as well. And I usually analyze the political interactions between these regions, interstate, intrastate, and the economic, socio-economic dynamics of African relations, as well as security issues, especially in these days when terrorism and other issues are coming up, while Africa is actually developing. African countries are developing, finding path to their development and making great strides in the development arena. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Fidel. We do really appreciate it. Next to before we continue, I'd like to bring my co-host, Jonathan Brown, Dr. Jonathan Joseph Brown. Welcome to the show, my brother. I know we been waiting to get you on. Thank you for making it.
Hello, everyone. I'm so glad to be on the show. So glad that you guys are with us. I believe we're going to have a great show. And those of you that are tuning in from the diaspora, from Africa, and all over the world, literally, welcome to the show. I know that you're going to be enlightened. I know that things are going to be said and shared that you're going to learn, you're going to be inspired, and together we're going to be informed and go to another level. So thank you, Senna. Thank you to the Progressive Mind Show for giving us this platform to meet together, to learn together, to grow together. I think it's going to be an amazing experience today. So glad that everybody's here.
Thank you so much, Jonathan, for making the show. We believe that, I know that on your way here, you reported that your mom is not feeling good. I hope that she's in a better situation.
Indeed, indeed.
Awesome, awesome. That is very, very important. Next on the bill, and actually our final guest here is Reverend Al Sampson. He is no stranger on the show. Reverend Al, can you hear us?
Yes. God bless.
So, right. Reverend Al Sampson is the only is one of the only 3 people that Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. ordained as a pastor. And we are glad to see and have him in our midst to educate, help us understand the work of Dr. Martin Luther King. It's a privilege to have an icon and such a great man who literally not only saw Dr. Martin Luther King, but worked hand in hand with him, traveled to Libya to see to Gaddafi, travel around the world with this great icon, Dr. Martin Luther King. So Reverend Sampson, it's an honor to have you in our studios once again.
Yes, I want to thank all of you, and I'm so happy that my beloved brother from the motherland, New Bernard Lafayette, him, James Bevel, James Lawson, all of them went to the American Baptist Institute. And that's, I think he's at Auburn University now. And I'm so happy to be with this great group at this moment in time, because what has happened is our ability to pass the baton to the sons and daughters of God from the motherland.
Awesome.
I'm the only man that was ordained by Dr. King that was a member of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. I was the assistant director of affiliates under the leadership of Reverend C.T. Vivian. It was out of that context that I ended up one day walking in his office and asked him to allow me to be ordained. And I wanted, because I was in seminary down in Atlanta at ITC, and I wanted Dr. King to ordain me. And the interesting thing is, his roommate at Morehouse College was my pastor, Earl Wesley Lawson of Emmanuel Baptist Church in Malden, Massachusetts, where I got licensed to preach. So this is a great moment in time. The decision that I made 40 plus years ago, close to 50 years ago. And I'm so happy, even though they have left me in the African context, the power of their spirit is still with me to give the baton to you all, my sons of tomorrow. So I love you all. God
we
bless
love you too. We love you too, Reverend. Now it's an honor to have.
We love you.
It's an honor to have you in our midst, and we really truly appreciate this. And Jonathan, I think that these discussions and conversations are very much needed in the diaspora, but not only here, but on the continent of Africa. And so we hope that as we engage, we can begin to unlearn or learn some of this very important information we need as a people as we forge ahead in creating a better diaspora and building the continent of Africa the way we want it.
Absolutely.
Great. That said, if we want during the show, we would open the phone line so folks can ring in and share their opinion. But for now, Reverend, I'd like to start with you for a second, where you ended up. We have learned and heard a lot about the work of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. One would wonder, how did he even become a civil rights activist? How did he walk into this space? Were there some people that trained him? Was there an inspiration? Do you know a little bit about how he got into civil rights or being the icon that he became in the first place?
Well, Dr. King studied Mahatma Gandhi, and he went and traveled to Montgomery, Alabama, where he became the pastor of Dexter Avenue Baptist Church. And based on that, he ended up a world traveler. I want to just show you so you all can say amen. You see this picture?
Yes.
And they're both holding hands.
Amen.
It was at that moment in history that they both realized, as you probably know, Dr. Nkrumah went to Lincoln University on the East Coast. And he studied the Marcus Garvey movement. He studied the Montgomery bus boycott. And based on studying those movements in Black America, it gave the seeds planted inside the spirit of our beloved brother, Brother Kwame Nkrumah. In March 1957, Martin Luther King and his wife, Coretta Scott King, traveled to West Africa to attend Ghana's independence ceremony. King's voyage was symbolic of a growing global alliance of oppressed peoples and was strategically well-timed. His audience represented an attempt to broaden the scope of the civil rights struggle in the United States on the heels of the successful Montgomery bus boycott. King identified with Ghana's struggle. Furthermore, he recognized a strong parallel between resistance against European colonialism in Africa and the struggle against racism in the United States. King was invited to the independence ceremony by Ghana's new Prime Minister, Kwame Nkrumah. King's friend, Bayard Rustin, coordinated the invitation with the help of Bill Sutherland, a civil rights activist and pacifist, who was then working for Nkrumah's finance minister, K.A. Obadama. King's trip was funded, listen to this, brothers, by the Montgomery Improvement Association and the Dexter Avenue Baptist Church, his congregation. King arrived in Accra, the Gold Coast, soon to be Ghana, on March 4th and attended a reception where he met Vice President Nixon. King told Nixon, "I want you to come visit us down in Alabama, where we are seeking the same kind of freedom the Gold Coast is celebrating." The next day, King attended the ceremonial closing of the old British Parliament. At the ceremony, the recently incarcerated Nkrumah and his ministers wore their prison caps, symbolizing their struggle to win Ghana's freedom. King wrote, "When I looked out and saw the Prime Minister there with his prison cap on that night, that reminded me of that fact that freedom never comes easy. It comes through hard labor and it comes through toil." At midnight on March 6th, King attended the official ceremony in which the British Union Jack flag was lowered and the new flag of Ghana was raised, and the British colony of the Gold Coast became the independent nation of Ghana. King later recalled, "As we walked out, we noticed all over the polo grounds almost 500,000 people. They had waited for this hour and this moment for years." King's reaction to the Ghanaian triumph was outwardly emotional. "Before I knew it, I started weeping. I was crying for joy. And I knew all about the struggles and all about the pain and all of the agony that these people had gone through for this moment." Also in attendance at the ceremony were many prominent American activists, politicians, and educators. A. Philip Randolph, Ralph Bunche, who got the Nobel Peace Prize, y'all. First time a Black got the Nobel Peace Prize for the two-state solution. Mordecai Johnson, the Dean of Howard University, President of Howard University. Horace Mann Bond, Julian Bond's daddy, who was president of Atlanta University. Senator Charles Diggs out of Detroit, and Martin Luther King's beloved friend, Congressman Adam Clayton Powell, pastor of the most powerful church in New York, Abyssinia Baptist Church, and also a congressman. The honor of inclusion in this impressive group indicated King's prominence as a civil rights figure, both home and abroad. Interviewed while in Ghana, King told radio listeners, "This event, the birth of this new nation, will give impetus to oppressed peoples, plural, all over the world. I think it will have worldwide implications and repercussions, not only for Asia and Africa, but also for America. It renews my conviction in the ultimate triumph of justice. And it seems to me that this is fits testimony to the fact that eventually the forces of justice triumph in the universe, and somehow the universe itself is on the side of freedom and justice, so that this gives new hope to me in the struggle for freedom. Despite falling ill for several days, the Kings had a private lunch with Prime Minister Nkrumah and met with anti-apartheid activists and Anglican priest Michael Scott and peace activist Homer Jack. King departed from Ghana for New York by way of Nigeria, Rome, Geneva, Paris, and London. In London, the Kings had lunch with Trinidadian writer and political activist C.L.R. James, who was very impressed by the success of the Montgomery bus boycott. August 28, 2013 marked the 50th anniversary of the historical March on Washington. On this day in 1963, more than 250,000 people came to Washington from all corners of America to march for freedom. Ironically, 28 was the 58th anniversary of the brutal racist murder of a 14-year-old black boy named Emmett Till in Money, Mississippi on August 28, 1955. On a more upbeat note, August 28 this year was the 5th anniversary of the historic speech of Senator Barack Obama in the summer of 2008.
Okay. How much more do we have?
Well, I'm about through because you all can finish. One of the good things I want to just conclude with this, Dr. King always put Ghana's independence in Africa in the context of the freedom struggle of Black people in America. He saw a strong connectivity between the Black freedom struggles on both continents in an essay entitled The Time for Freedom Has Come, written for the New York Times Magazine on September 29, 1961. Dr. King noted that many of the students, when pressed to express their inner feelings, identified themselves with students in Africa. The liberation struggle in Africa has been the greatest single international influence on American Black students. Frequently, I hear them say that if their brothers and sisters can break the bonds of colonization, surely the American Negro can break Jim Crow. African leaders such as President Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana, Governor General Nnamdi Azikiwe of Nigeria, Dr. Tom Mboya of Kenya, and Dr. Hastings Banda of Nyasaland are popular heroes on most Negro Black college campuses.
Okay.
Many groups demonstrated or otherwise protested when the Congo leader, Patrice Lumumba, was assassinated. Part of the impatience of Negro Black youth stems from their observations that change has taken place rapidly in Africa and other parts of the world, but comparatively slow in the South. And the new order that Dr. King spoke of on the 6th of March, 1957 in Ghana, culminated 37 years later with the swearing in of Nelson Mandela as the first Black president of South Africa. On
Okay.
May 11th,
Let's put a hold. Let's put a halt on that. We'll come back for the continuation. This is a powerful story, great opening to what we're about to discuss. Dr. Jonathan Brown, I don't know if you have a comment, but I did like Fidel to juxtapose what we just heard and how and what he knows of the impact and the work of what Reverend Al just shared with us to Ghana and to Africa. But before that, Dr. Jonathan Brown, if you have a comment, please go ahead.
I just want to echo and say that thank you, Dr. Sampson, for that great introduction and that information that you were reading to us. And that's what really the show is about today. Yeah. It's about how Dr. King influenced Africa and how the connect between his his spirit of nonviolence, his spirit of civil rights. Not only did it affect America, but it also affected Africa, which in turns affects the diaspora. And so I'm excited to jump into here, and I don't want to take too much time. I just want to jump in here and get some information and some insight from our wonderful guests that we have on here. So, Senna, yes, let's keep moving.
Thank you. And Brother Ak, GAMARIYAHU will be coming to you for your take on what we just heard and how it transcends into the Black Jewish community in Israel. But before that, Brother Fidel, please.
This is a very interesting and very intriguing statement that Reverend read. And in fact, in my preparation towards this important program, I went through this statement. Now, what really should draw our attention is what Dr. King told Richard Nixon at the time, the Vice President of the United States. He told him that back at home in Alabama, we want exactly what you've come here to witness.
Right.
And this is where I start my statement, or start my explanation. And it's the fact that after the Second World War, many African colonies decided that a devastated Europe provided the opportunity to liberate themselves. And so Nkrumah actually came back from England. I'll later talk about his time in the United States. But before that, after that, he had stayed in England, and he moved from England to Ghana, or the Gold Coast, which later became Ghana in 1947. That was after the Second World War in 1945. Now, his coming meant that he joined the UGCC and he started the struggle. So, in many ways, the United States was not seen as an imperial power because it did not have colonies in Africa, except for Liberia, where some freed slaves were resettled. The whole of Africa, the United States did not have any colony whatsoever. So the United States was seen as more of siding with colonial or colonies or oppressed people. And so the attendance of Richard Nixon in that particular celebration in 1957 was a sign that the US was in principle backing liberated states in Africa. But then Martin Luther King, Dr. Martin Luther King, being very intelligent, was drawing the attention of Richard Nixon that no, that's not what is happening. Back home, you are doing exactly what the Europeans were doing in Africa before the liberation of Ghana. And that is very important. And this shows the kind of symbiotic relations that freedom fighters in Africa had with those in the United States.
Now, wait. Hold on, because I want you to say that one more time. As we say over here in America, say that again for the people in the back, because you just connected something that happened in Ghana that also happened here. Say that again. My goodness, that's so good.
Well, to succinctly put it, is the fact that even though the United States was not a colonial power in Africa, the fact that blacks were oppressed, segregated against in the United States was itself also an oppression and was seen as akin to what the Europeans were doing in Africa.
Right.
And so oppression in Africa by Europeans was also like what the United States what practiced in the United States back before 1964 and 1965. And so Martin Luther King was drawing the attention of the US vice president, who was in Ghana to celebrate with the newly liberated country that, look, this is not enough. Go back home and do the right thing. And that, to me, was very important and was very savvy and intelligent statement that Dr. King had made. And that in itself will perhaps, when Nixon got back home, I think that will haunt him over time. And even because, and I think that it cumulatively influenced how Washington or the establishment in Washington decided to then have a second thought about what was happening, especially in the southern states of the United States.
Can I say something?
Yes.
All my life, I have been told and I have known or learned that whatever happens in Israel is a sign to the Christian church. But what I'm just hearing is what happens in Africa is a sign as to what's going on in the diaspora here. Am I right in thinking that? Somebody correct me if I'm wrong.
The reason why you're absolutely right is that our beloved brother from Gambia ended up letting us know when he wrote the book Alex Haley's Roots, and it got translated into several languages in various countries in Africa. And I'm a product of what we call now the African genealogy, because there's a man that's at Morehouse School of Medicine named Dr. Rick Kittles. And I ended up, because I'm an adopted child, I've never seen my real mother except in a mental hospital. And I was always worried about my cultural identity. So I took the genealogy text, where you swab your mouth on, and when you swab it, this brilliant brother who started out at Howard University, who's now at Morehouse School of Medicine, and I found out that on my mama's side, I'm from Sierra Leone, and I went there and got my name, Pasori Kamara. They snatched you from us, and we snatching you back to us. And then I went and got my daddy, because I was worried about my father. I found out that my uncle, my father that adopted me, Flora was his sister, and I ended up being his son. Fast forward, I did my daddy's side, and I found out I'm from Nigeria, and I'm Igbo, and they gave me my name with the Igbo nation. And then I did it one more time, y'all, because I was worried about this one more time. And Gina Page, Rick Kittle's marketing person, came to my church. And while the people were giving me a standing ovation, Gina Page had already told me that I came from no white blood in me. My mama didn't get violated by nobody on the white hand side. And I was able to.
So I want to come back to you, Reverend, on that, because there's a lot there, and thank you so much for sharing. Fidel, we will go into the depth of the work, the significance, but brilliant points. We really appreciate that. GAMARIYAHU, again, drawing from a brilliant introduction of Reverend Al Samson.
Yes.
How does Dr. King's work and philosophy of nonviolence in the midst of adversity or adversities translate to the work that is being done in the Village of Peace?
Yes.
Israel.
Well, before I get there,
okay.
Before I get there, I first need to emphasize what the brother, the security consultant, said. It's a very excellent point.
His name is Fidel.
Brother Fidel, thank you very much, because it points to the fact that what Dr. King was exposing to Vice President Nixon was a very unpopular decision. So we must first, in discussing Dr. King, we must refocus the lens, which is something that we teach within the Institute, these dynamics of it. Dr. King was in 2024, Dr. King is universally loved.
That's right.
In 1964, he was almost universally we'll say mildly unliked. He was a very unpopular person. In his book, The Strength to Love, the second chapter, which is entitled Transformed Nonconformist, he's referencing Romans 12:2, where it says, "Be ye not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind." Dr. King's letter from a Birmingham jail was written to pastors in the Baptist persuasion that he was a part of, because they did not agree with the work that he was doing. They felt that the protesting was causing people to be hurt. It was causing the violence. But I need for us first, it's very, very significant for us to understand that when we talk about Dr. King, we must understand the context of the times that he was working and who he actually was at that time. The work that he was doing was not popular at all. And I can speak appropriately to these things. Both of my parents grew up in Birmingham, Alabama, and they were told not to go and participate. Some of my aunts and uncles went, others did not. I'm speaking to you all now from Chester, Pennsylvania, which is where Dr. King actually studied his theological seminary work and was the pastor at my mother and father's church, the historic Calvary Baptist Church. So what I'm saying to you, we have to, that when we talk about Dr. King, and with this today being the observance of Malcolm X Day, May 19th, throughout the world, that it's almost necessary to look at Dr. King very similarly as we look at Malcolm X, in that he went through a spiritual, political transformation as he went through the work that he was doing. Now, in regard to your question about DIMONA and the work that we did there with the establishment of the Institute, primarily to use the precepts, primarily the 6 principles, of nonviolence, the 6 steps.
Seven principles.
Well, with Dr. Lafayette, he taught it to me as 6. So I'm very interested to get that information from you on the 7th. But with the 6 that we have, it's a very robust platform from which we can approach the idea of eradicating violence in all of its forms, not just physical violence, but emotional violence, but verbal violence, all of these kinds of things. So being in Israel and dealing firsthand with Israelis and Palestinians, and having the opportunity to use Dr. King, the Kingian school of conflict resolution, we're able to create a scenario where we can engage unfamiliar parties and begin to find commonality and begin to use these principles that these people would actually go back into their own communities. And as I close in response to your question, ultimately, the main idea of what we're doing, Dr. Lafayette said this directly to me. We're talking about conflict resolution. However, the body of knowledge that Dr. Lafayette put together is really a tool for identifying and educating leaders. He said, this is a tool to identify the leaders in the room and give them the information that they need to go forth, as with the work of the Shiloh Institute, and be ethical leaders.
Thank you so much, Brother GAMARIYAHU, for a great response. And you're still watching the Progressive Mind Show. This is a Sunday episode, and we're here from 4 to 6 p.m. Central Time. If you're in Ghana, it's 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. And I know it's dark now. Fidel, I know you had a little issue with your technicalities, but we will leave it at that. We're glad that you are still hanging on and still being able to help us with the discussion. My co-host, Dr. Jonathan Brown, needed to take leave of us to attend to his mom in the hospital. So we are sending prayers with him.
Yeah. Yeah.
The show continues, and we want to. We still want to look at. You talked about 6 principles of Dr. Martin Luther King.
Yes.
Reverend Al, I've heard you talk about the 7 principles. Before I come to you, Fidel, to get deeper into his work in Ghana and Africa, Reverend Al, can you walk us, not literally go through the entire thing, but the 7? Can you mention the 7 steps or 7 principles of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King?
Yeah, it's what I told you all last time. It's information, education, negotiation, confrontation, and then the fasting, which is being able to realize when remember I told you we went to Parchman, Alcatraz, Mississippi State Penitentiary. And when you fast, it means that you're not participating in the incarceration. And that's one of the fundamental principles of nonviolence. And then the last one is recreation. I can return creating because I've got me some new information.
Right.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. You wanted to respond to that?
Brother Senator, may I just
Yes.
dovetail on what Reverend Sampson has provided? Yes, those would be as I was taught them, the 6 steps, the 7 steps for Reverend Sampson. Those are the steps.
Right.
Within the conflict resolution school, there are 2 main pillars. The one pillar Dr. Sampson just gave us. The other pillar are the 6 principles.
That's right.
So with the 6 principles, if I may very briefly share those with the audience,
Sure.
they are very, very important and dynamic to understanding everything. The first principle is that nonviolence is a way of life for courageous people. That's the first principle. Now, I'm not going to explain these unless we want to go more in depth. I'll just state what they are. The second principle is that the beloved community is the framework for the future. That's the second principle. The beloved community is the framework for the future. The third principle is attack forces of evil, not persons doing evil. Attack the forces of evil, not persons doing evil. The fourth principle, accept suffering without retaliation for the sake of the cause to achieve the goal. I repeat, the fourth principle is to accept suffering without retaliation for the sake of the cause to achieve the goal. The fifth principle of the 6 principles is avoid internal violence of the spirit as well as external physical violence. Avoid internal violence of the spirit as well as external physical violence. And the sixth principle is I don't know if there's a favorite, but I really like this one. It speaks to a quote that was very well known for Dr. King, where he said, the moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends toward justice. And the 6th principle is that the universe is on the side of justice. The 6th principle, and this is, you have on the one hand, the 6 principles, and then on the other hand, you have the 6 steps. So the 6th principle is that the universe is on the side of justice, which means that if you are on the right side, we win. Thank you.
So there are, thank you so much. So there are 6 principles and 7 steps.
That's what I would say at this point with Dr. Sampson's input, because we were not taught the fasting step that he provided, and okay. I was given some backstory to that, why that happened.
Okay.
Well, one of the good things about it is, and that's why this is not, quote unquote, an intellectual argument. This is language for liberation.
Yes.
And all of us have different automobiles, but they get us to our particular destination.
Okay.
And so that's why I don't want our radio listening TV audience to be confused. I will send you my book where we talk about the 7 principles of nonviolence. That's why Dick Gregory was able to do 50 days, 70 days, 80 days fasting, because the problem with Parchment, which is Alcatraz, Mississippi State Penitentiary, and all penitentiaries that our people are locked up in, it's an economic proposition. But if you don't drink the milk, if you don't eat the bread, it backs up in the cow, and it lays in the ground because you're not participating in the illicit relationship. So we are moving with the language of liberation, and that's why we can have different kinds of lemonade and different kinds of vitamins in order to get us to, and the child grew with wisdom, stature, and in favor with God and man. I just want our listening audience to realize that we're not in any conflict. Malcolm X talked with Coretta King when Martin Luther King went to prison, and he wrote his letter from the Birmingham jail.
Yes.
He talked with her, and then when he went to Mecca, it turned him around because he was able to see what I saw when we wrote the original, when we did the original African Heritage Study Bible, and we did the 12 steps in DIMONA, and we get to the ninth, what they call the 12 steps of Jesus, and we got to the 9th step, and we met an Ethiopian Christian, and he was so happy to see us as American Christians that he introduced us to the Ethiopian Muslims, and he introduced us to the Ethiopian Hebrew, and all of us representing the religions of our faith, we all cried and was hugging each other.
Yes.
Because of our deep-seated language of liberation.
Yes, sir.
And that's why I'm the only minister that opened the doors of my church to Minister Farrakhan. And he gave me the Quran, and in it he said, to the only man that opened the doors of his church when he left New York and came to Chicago, Prince Asiel Ben Israel, he became a part. And then when Minister Farrakhan opened up, he bought the Greek Orthodox Church on 76th and Stony Island. And then he invited Prince Asiel, representing the Old Testament, me representing the New Testament, and he lit the crescent. He turned it on. And for the first time, they call us the 3 wise men, the 3 brothers that went to say, God bless to Mary for giving us the Son of Jesus. Somebody say amen, please.
The Son of God.
Amen. Amen.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing, Reverend Samson. Fidel, I want to come back to you regarding your observation and the impact of Dr. King's work in Ghana. We all grew up in Ghana. I think that this is something that has not been taught us in depth when it comes to the relationship of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King and Kwame Nkrumah. What would you say to this, and how significant should this education be done, or just how significant of this education in the economy of Ghana, not only Ghana but West Africa?
Thank you very much for this question. It's very important. First of all, there's a background to this.
Okay.
And we have to start by saying that Dr. Kwame Nkrumah was born in 1909, while Dr. King was born in 1929. That is supposed to be 20 years. That Dr. King is 20 years younger than Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. However, they had some parallel life or some similarities in their path. I mean, it's very interesting. For instance, it was in North America that Dr. King first realized that in some communities, the black man could live alongside the whites, even though it wasn't a perfect or a kind of an ideal situation or an ideal environment. he saw that, and that really rekindled his spirit in what he saw down in Georgia or in the southern states of America, where the black man was segregated against, was ostracized, and was abused, more or less. I mean, injustice in the South. So that was very important. Dr. Kwame Nkrumah also was in the United States in 1935. He came there to receive his education right from West Africa. And over there, he was in Pennsylvania. And interestingly, Dr. King also attended his divinity degree, or had his divinity degree in Pennsylvania.
Lincoln University.
Yes, and all this while, they had not met. And that is very important. Now, in 1945, Dr. Nkrumah organized the African Congress, the All-African Congress, Pan-African Congress in Manchester. Okay. And at that time, Dr. King was just about finishing the Morehouse, his college. And so that is very interesting. And one other thing is that it was when Dr. Nkrumah got back to Africa, that was when Dr. King had actually started his civil rights movement, or his civil rights advocacy, which he had started as a precocious child. You know, if you look at Dr. King, you could see that he had this kind of talent of oratory. And, you know, we often say that children have their parents as role models. And his father being in the clergy, and he has that kind of family relations, and he always sat in the church listening to his father's oratory in church, like Reverend Sampson's children will learn from him, his oratory, his guidance to the sheep, and all that. He learned that at an early age, and so the charisma, and he was a handsome man, by all standards, and you could see that kind of charisma that he carried along. Nkrumah was doing something similar in the Gold Coast, where he joined the UGC as a general secretary, and his charisma eventually made him break away from people he had seen to be too incremental. Nkrumah wanted independence now, while his earlier compatriot wanted independence in the shortest possible time. Nkrumah thought that shortest possible time was too vague. Someone could take 50 years to be the shortest possible time. But he said now, and he was advocating for that. So in 1957, when Nkrumah invited Dr. King to the independence of Ghana, the celebration, he knew that across the Atlantic, there was someone who was actually doing what he was doing on the continent.
Yes, right.
And he felt that in that momentous time, or in that season, or that event, Dr. King was supposed to be present in order to communicate to the rest of the world that injustice anywhere was injustice everywhere. And that Dr. King, the destiny of the black man in North America was inextricably intertwined with those on the continent in Africa. And it wasn't different. And that was very important. And so you could see that their influence was symbiotic. Dr. King was impressed from the statement by Reverend. You could say Dr. King was impressed by Nkrumah's exploit and the fact that the Gold Coast had been liberated. Equally, Nkrumah was also, influenced by Dr. King, because he had lived in the United States. He saw what was happening in the United States, and back in Africa, he had heard what was happening, the kind of movement that Dr. King was pushing, that he was leading, the kind of oratory, and which was gingering and which was changing or making waves in North America. In fact, one thing that was also common with these two gentlemen was the fact that while Eisenhower, the US President Eisenhower, that was Nixon's, boss, was ignoring most of the things that were happening, John F. Kennedy listened to the movement. The same way Dr. Nkrumah had the audience of John F. Kennedy. And actually, it was President Kennedy that provided funding for Ghana's first hydroelectric dam. And the building of the Tema Township. And the aluminum smelter that was created, that's
ALUX.
Yes, Vaco.
And Vaco,
yes. And that was also provided by John F. Kennedy. So you could see the two gentlemen had a common individual, that is in John F. Kennedy, who was willing to listen to them. Now, up to today, we still have the Akosombo Dam supporting Ghana's hydroelectric needs.
Yes.
After decades. The Tema Township is still an industrial hub in Ghana, and one of the largest in West Africa.
Yes.
Now, that is one thing that was also common to them. Again, tragically, when Dr. King was assassinated in 1967, Nkrumah had been earlier, was it 68 or 67? I think
68. April 4th.
So 2 years earlier, Dr. Nkrumah had been overthrown in Ghana. And so there's that. I mean, 2 years is not too, I mean, it's not that apart. It's just the same 2 years is very close. And that was tragic. And that led to some, in the United States, because of the institutionalization of the reforms, the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, and all that, that was sustained over time. And eventually, that gave birth to Barack Obama. Now, in the case of Africa, Nkrumah's overthrow led to that kind of dip where military dictators, I mean, swept across the continent, and it actually drew us back. And currently, there is this kind of renaissance still happening. I think as this discussion goes on, most of these things will be discussed.
No, thank you. That is very, very deep. I was going to ask, thank you so much for a brilliant submission. And I lived in Tema for a very large part of my life. So I understand perfectly what you said when it comes to how Nkrumah built that town, that city, with Valco, the Tema oil refinery, the cocoa processing company, which is where the chocolate factory, which is a place I actually worked before coming here, very, very, very significant. So you will say that when it comes to the economy and the political spectrum of Ghana, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King's influence or partnership with Nkrumah is so significant that had it not been that, would you say it would be fair to say, had it not been for that relationship, would you say that we would have had Nkrumah the way we had him and the kind of impact that he brought to Ghana and as such West Africa?
So after Dr. King attended the independence celebration, it was only natural that he didn't see his cause to be only limited across the Atlantic or in North America. He also saw the cause to be linked to the liberation of Africa.
Okay.
And so Nkrumah himself also declared on the night of independence, that at the dawn of independence, that the independence of Ghana was meaningless unless it was linked up to the total liberation of Africa.
Okay.
Exactly.
That was very important.
Yes.
Later, Dr. W.B. Du Bois relocated to Ghana and actually, I mean, assumed the citizenship of Ghana and did a lot of Pan-African work until he passed on and had his remains. And we still have his remains in Ghana.
Yes.
But going back, you realize that after that, before John F. Kennedy was elected, he had actually used the audience that he had granted to the civil rights movement to his advantage. In fact, he won the elections. He granted an audience and mentioned that there was a need for the black man to be free before his election. And that actually really helped him to win the elections. Now with that, it meant that whatever Nkrumah requested was seen to reflect the plight of the black man in North America. And so by and large, whereas I cannot point to some meeting that discussed socio-economic issues in Ghana, in North America, between the two great men, I see that influence was psychologically significant. And mostly when it comes to some of these things, we downplay the psychological aspect of things. And it was very critical that, look, right here, these are guys who are going to be given voting right to vote. And to the American politician, he saw that by helping Africans, I get to win the hearts of the black man in America.
Right.
And may I say this? May I say this, please?
Yes.
I'm in a book entitled The Heart of Atlanta. I was the executive secretary of the Atlanta branch of the NAACP. And based on that book, there were 5 pastors where I was the leader in the group, and they were in seminary. And we drove to South Carolina, and we made a reservation for the Atlanta motel, called and made it, accepted it. When we got there and they saw that we were black, they told us, oh, no, I'm very sorry, but we're not serving. Y'all can't come here. But we got rid of it. No, you're black. And then there was a restaurant, and that restaurant was called Lester Maddox Pickwick Restaurant case. And they wouldn't let us in to eat. It was Robert Kennedy, Attorney General, with a woman named Constance Baker Motley, who was the lawyer, the legal defense lawyer. And on the stand, this is what they said to Lester Maddox. You're not letting black folk eat at the red. No, I'm not going to use the N-word. I'm on international television. She said, okay. I'd like to just ask you, where do you get your potatoes from? Idaho. Where do you get your rice from? Arkansas. Where you get your greens from? Down in Mississippi, Alcorn. And the point was, she kept asking about how products could go across state lines, but black folk couldn't go across state lines. It was based on commerce. And that's why they ended up opening the doors of everything in Black America and white America because of the principle of commerce. And the reason why Ghana and our work that we're doing, listen to this piece. I'm on the board of the World Conference of Mayors under the leadership of Mayor Johnny Ford. And a friend of mine, Michael Thompson, we went to Tulsa, Oklahoma for the 100-year anniversary last year, 2 years ago. And we took the oldest people of Tulsa, Oklahoma. It's called Black Wall Street. Y'all heard about that. And where they did the bombing and all. The first time in the history of the world, or in America, they had airplanes because Shell Oil was trying to protect their oil and blacks was participating in the economy. The bottom line is Michael Thompson took the brothers and sisters, the oldest, to Ghana. They gave them land. Stokely Carmichael's son, who I married, him and his wife Nataki, their son is sitting there in Ghana right now with a think tank. Fred Hampton of the Black Panthers, his daddy, the boy that was in his mama's belly when the people in Chicago ended up assassinating Fred Hampton. The son is my son. They call me, because I'm an old man, they call me their dad. And the deep part about it is he went to Ghana. They gave him land. But here's the most amazing thing that brings tears to my eyes. Last year, on February 28th, the president of Ghana came to Washington, D.C. and gave the oldest people in Black Wall Street, he gave them dual citizenship. I ain't heard nobody say amen.
Amen.
No, thank you. Yes. And building these bridges with these acts as it pertains to Ghana and Black America is something that is very profound. And I think that we need to do a lot of work in educating our communities and our people to understand the work that has been done, the sacrifices that has been made, but yet the progress that we have chalked so far and what is to come. And I think that Fidel, I don't think that in Ghana we understand the foundation that was set by these two gentlemen, or I'll say the relationship between Ghana and America the way we're supposed to. From what I'm learning from, go ahead.
Yeah, so the understanding is always different because like I've discussed with you earlier, that not so many people are interested in what happens beyond the borders of Ghana.
Yes.
And that is something that we need a renaissance in our consciousness. Because when Nkrumah declared that the independence of Ghana was meaningless unless it was linked up to the total liberation of Africa, he had this big vision of Africa getting liberated so that our brothers in the diaspora could come back and join us here. Because you cannot have your home occupied and be inviting a brother who has perhaps traveled outside or have been stolen outside to join you. So you needed to create a home or make the home a comfortable place for others to join.
Yes.
Now, with that said, Dr. Nkrumah set out to help other countries to get liberated. And as Reverend mentioned, when Dr. King was leaving Ghana back to after the celebration, he went through Nigeria and other places before going because he was interested in the African continent and not just Ghana, just like Kwame Nkrumah. So if you compare their vision, they all had a bigger vision for Africa. And so Dr. Nkrumah literally was using the resources of Ghana to help other countries in Africa get liberated. He helped Nigeria, he helped Guinea. In fact, in the case of Guinea, it is one sad story. Now, this is what happened. In the late 1950s, France found itself in limbo, whether to grant independence to 8 colonies or not. But with the wind blowing, the wind of liberation blowing across Africa, it didn't have a choice than to grant independence. However, because France had depended so much on the resources of their colonies, they wanted an arranged independence where their African colonies were granted independence, but that independence was limited. So France could still influence what happened within these countries and have a larger say or a bigger say in how resources are exploited.
Right.
So Francophone colonies were given that kind of liberty to vote on whether to join what they call the French community of Francophonie or to go solo in their independence. The Republic of Guinea decided to go solo, that, well, we don't want to join any arranged independence. We want to have true independence.
Right.
So in 1958, France granted independence to Guinea, but at a cost. France was so livid and upset about Guinea wanting to go solo, so much so that France took away everything from Conakry, the capital of Guinea, including electric sockets that the colonial powers have built in walls, including medicines that have been provided for the health sector. They bent all the medicine. They actually scrapped roads, asphalt off the road because they had decided to go there. So, you know what Nkrumah did? Nkrumah did something very significant. He gave Guinea 10 million pounds at a time. So Ghana single-handedly sponsored the independence of Guinea.
Yes.
And
the last time, please let me point this out. The last time I was at
let him finish. Reverend Al, let him finish the point. Let me land on this point.
All right, very well. Very well.
So Nkrumah single-handedly did that. And in fact, it was such a disaster. So Guinea, after independence, was willing to unite with Ghana. In fact, it started the Ghana-Mali-Guinea Union.
Okay.
Until when the OAU, because Nkrumah wanted a big Africa and not just 3 countries coming together. So when the OAU, the Organization of African Unity, was going to be formed, then Nkrumah said, look, we cannot have an organization within an organization. So the Mali-Guinea-Ghana Union was disbanded in order to have a bigger Africa.
Right.
Which in any way was disappointment because Nkrumah wanted Africa with one currency, one anthem, one flag, one military high command, one economy, and one political system. But his compatriots did not understand him at the time. They thought that Nkrumah was too radical. He wanted things too fast. So his compatriots like Julius Nyerere had opinion. They were not bad people. No, they just were not sure of Nkrumah's path. So they opted for a loose union like the OAU, which in the end, Julius Nyerere had come out to say that he misunderstood Kwame Nkrumah.
Right.
And that, on the hindsight, he would have sided with him. And this is very profound. And currently, Africa is still talking about a military high command for its security purposes or to address its security needs. So you can see the kind of man we are talking about.
Yes. And when you talk about Joseph Julius Nyerere, that was the Tanzanian president or Ugandan?
Yes.
Tanzanian president. Yes.
Thank you. Tanzania.
Yes. Thank you so much for that great submission and that whole Guinea story. And that's where Nkrumah ended up dying, right?
Yes. He lived when he was overthrown because of his good works. He was made co-president in Guinea. So he was not a vice president in Guinea. They made him co-president. He had the same status as the president of Guinea when he was overthrown in Ghana. And because earlier in northern Ghana, there was an assassination attempt, which he escaped death, but he had some of the shrapnel under his skin, and it actually resulted in a cancer. So he literally died in Romania, where he was seeking medical help. But then he was flown in from Guinea, where he was based, to Romania, where he died in 1972. Yeah.
I think you would have to take that part again.
Yeah.
How, when he, how he helped liberate or how he helped fund the Independence Day of Guinea, Conakry, when he came to Ghana, how he was almost assassinated and connected. I would like you to take that part again because it's very, very significant.
All right.
But before that, Brother Ak, you've been listening carefully. You want to comment on anything that's been said so far?
Yeah.
Thank you. Humbly, I would like to add a little piece of information in addition to what Brother Fidel masterfully shared about the co-existence and the work and the lives of Kwame Nkrumah and Dr. King. But what I would like to also do is try to bring us up to date in terms of the current issues and concerns for Africans and indigenous Africans, diaspora Africans, and Blacks in America. And I'd like to do it this way. I would also add to your list, Brother Fidel, that, I attended Lincoln University. So very familiar with what you spoke of. And I also read, having grown up in Chester, Pennsylvania, that while Kwame Nkrumah was here in the States, that he also worked at a place called Sun Ship, where they built ocean-going vessels in Chester, Pennsylvania. So Dr. Nkrumah also had some time that he spent in the city of Chester, Pennsylvania, which is over probably about 65% Black. And Dr. King also, of course, he studied, he went to Chester Theological Seminary here in Chester, and he also pastored at the historic Calvary Baptist Church. Now, having mentioned Lincoln University and having been a student there, and as we speak to the current scenario and why it's so important that we discuss Kwame Nkrumah, that we discuss Martin Luther King today, because the role that they play in terms of the relationship between indigenous Africans, indigenous Black Americans, and diasporal Africans, descendants of Africa, is very, very important, because by and large, we do not know one another. You cannot love a stranger. when I was at Lincoln University, because I had some background in African history and Black history and so forth, the people who came from the Caribbean were not foreign to me. The brothers and sisters that came from Africa were not foreign to me. So we interacted, but by and large, on these campuses in the United States, the international students do not interact with the indigenous Blacks here in the country. And,
Right.
and that's on both sides.
Yes.
It's not one side doing it to the other and all of that. So I'm saying that as some of the work that needs to be done today that existed back when they created universities when I went to one. So I just want to share that because it's very important, especially when we're talking about the work that Reverend Sampson is doing, when we're talking about the work that I've been blessed through Dr. Lafayette to also share, that we use all of these tools that we have so that we can begin to learn and know one another, because again, you cannot love a stranger. So once we get to know each other, I've always found that we have very little that is different about us that could keep us separate anymore. It is very, very significant that we take every opportunity that we possibly can to create these kinds of linkages, these ties, and these relationships. So I'm just cautioning everyone to the oversimplification of history.
Okay.
We cannot oversimplify the work and what it took for Dr. King to do the things that he did. We must also point out that today's quote unquote terrorist is tomorrow's freedom fighter. Kwame Nkrumah went to prison fighting for his rights. Dr. King went to prison. Nelson Mandela, Mugabe in Zimbabwe, across the board, all throughout Africa. See, when time passes, unfortunately, what the elder John Henrik Clarke told us, he said, if we learn anything from history, it's that we learn nothing from history. We must be very, very alert and very attentive to make sure that we pass on all of this information so that we have the proper context for how we can engage one another, how we can develop communities throughout the diaspora in Africa, and how we can really, really be brothers and sisters, you know, and promote Africa for Africans at home and abroad. So I just wanted to add that little piece about Chester. I love the list that Brother Fidel gave, and they both men also had some time that they spent here in Chester, Pennsylvania. I call it the gateway city to the world. You can get anywhere from here. Thank you.
You're welcome. I want to follow up with real quick before I go to Reverend Al. But before that, I want to just acknowledge that this is the Progressive Mind Show. We're here every Tuesday from 6 to 8 p.m. And then on Sundays, we're here at 4 p.m. Central Time, discussing issues that cut across the diaspora. And so just to make sure that you're following us on Facebook and YouTube. While you were there, subscribe so that when we come on live, you can get a notification and be a part of this ongoing discussions about connecting the diaspora and building a better community for all of us. Once again, we are live on Facebook right now and on YouTube. This show is a 501c3. Your donations helps us to sustain this show on a weekly basis, and the programs that we curate. Right now, we have our next big program, which is coming up this summer, June 22nd, and it's called the Exchange Ceremony. It is very much connected to the conversation that we're having. How do we hone in on the work that has been done by our ancestors? How do we build upon the work that has been done by people like icons and legends like Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, and the likes, so that we can leave a better diaspora, better Africa for the future generation, for our today, for our sister and today, and for the future generation. Because had these people not lived for something greater, had these people not seen a vision like this, we probably wouldn't be in America doing live podcasts and talking about the diaspora, or maybe enjoying African festivals all over America freely. Because when you go to Europe and you go to Asia, you go to the Middle East, we know the plight of Africans. These are not hearsay or fictions. We know what Africans are going through even in some northern part of Africa, Libya. And this is very close to home to all of us. We know people, literally, relatives and cousins and friends, who have been tortured, who are going through atrocious and inhumane treatments in other countries just because they live in the continent of Africa in seek of greener pastures. But we are blessed in America in the way that legends and Black leaders have paved the way for us. And so when African immigrants come here in America, especially, our lives are a bit more comfortable, and we are able to thrive and succeed in this country. And so we need to pay heed to these things and build off of these relationships. So June 20th, 21st, and 22nd, we invite you all to the exchange ceremony, where we're going to be connecting the African diaspora through our food, fashion, and dance. We're also going to take the opportunity to crown live African Americans, and that is our restoration of the royalty program, restoring the royalty of our brothers and sisters, the kings and queens that were snatched away from the continent of Africa. It is time Africa brings back what was stolen from our brothers. As not only the royalty, is the land, the culture, and everything that the African American desires and yearns from Africa. We have to reach out as Africans. It's our moral obligation. It is due. Time is way past due. Time is way past due for us to embark on this journey, to embrace our brothers and sisters in the diaspora and welcome them home. And not only welcome them, but provide the right environment for them to come and thrive. Again, following the footsteps and following the vision of Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. So June 20th, 21st, and 22nd, we're inviting you all to the city of Chicago. The date, 20th is a business meeting. Friday, we have a panel discussion. 22nd is the culmination of the event. We're going to have a food. We're going to have fashion from the diaspora, food from the diaspora community, fashion as well. And then our dance, our cultural dances from the African, Caribbean, African American, Latino, South American communities, depicting our connection through these cultures and values that we all share together. And then we would honor and crown this year's kings and queens and royalties at this event. It's going to be a beautiful healing and uniting ceremony for all of us as we acknowledge our cultures together. So June 22nd in the city of Chicago. Make a date with us. Visit all our social media platforms, on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, the exchange ceremony. The exchange ceremony. If you Google us, you can go on the website, check us out, get to learn more about it. Send us an email if you want to be part of this or get to learn more about this. On that note, we would like to go back to our guest this evening to continue the conversation. And I'd like to get a little, I wanted, before I went on the short break, to follow up with Brother GAMARIYAHU. And I'll come to Reverend Al. Bear with us. It's 5:20, 5:30. We'll be closing up the next 15 minutes. But a quick follow-up for you, Brother GAMARIYAHU, is that help us understand, if you may, the relationship, because we know you've mentioned that, yes, the two men were in the same space. They went to the same seminary school in Philadelphia. Can you help us understand the intricacy of their relationship? Were there times where they had to go to setting marches together or setting meetings together? How were these men related? How was their relationship on campus or in that space? And what became of it aside the work they did globally?
Well, Dr. King and President Nkrumah, they did not attend the same university at all. So if that was ever, I'm sure that was not expressed. However, the main interaction that I am aware has already been discussed, which was with the independence ceremonies in 1957, which Dr. King was invited there. If I might take a small liberty, because you had mentioned earlier that you wanted to know more about the involvement of Dr. King in Israel, which is, of course, Northeast Africa. I need everyone to understand that those countries that have been called, quote unquote, the Middle East, we should ask ourselves the question, well, where is the Middle West? And all of that part of the world is Northeast Africa. It is a geopolitical term to call it the Middle East, which divides all of the people of African descent from the interior of Africa. It also divides all of the predominant holy places on the planet. You lose Mecca and Medina when you separate those. You lose Jerusalem when you separate those by the man-made ditch of the Suez Canal. Dr. King, he visited Ghana in 1957. He also visited Israel in 1959. And he was, Dr. Sampson made no more details about this, but he had charged Ambassador Andrew Young with coordinating and organizing. You all are going to love this. I guarantee most of you know nothing about it. Dr. King's vision was to lead a pilgrimage of 5,000 people to Israel, to the Sea of Galilee, where the Sermon on the Mountain and the Beatitudes took place, on a peace pilgrimage to Israel. He wanted to take 5,000 people to Israel on a peace pilgrimage. So some of the work that we had been involved in when I was the initial director of the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. SCLC Ben Ami Institute for a New Humanity, which was the first conflict reconciliation center established under the auspices of the SCLC anywhere on the planet. So what the vision is at this time is that we will recreate those conflict resolution centers at HBCUs and other places around the world, so that we can continue to put forth these teachings and try to eliminate try to eliminate violence in all of its forms and promote peace. Last thing, I'll close with this. Thank you for your attention. The one thing we were talking about earlier about President Nkrumah's impatience with waiting on so-called answers that they were being given to wait, and freedom will come, and just be patient, and those types of things. This is something that we teach about within the Conflict Reconciliation Center. This is called negative peace. Negative peace, which is calm. When there is calm, that is not the presence of justice. And this is what President Nkrumah and the visionaries such as Dr. Martin Luther King understood, that even though there may be calm in the status quo, if there is injustice, then justice delayed is most definitely justice being denied.
Thank you so much, Brother GAMARIYAHU, for a great submission. Reverend Al, before we come to you, Fidel, I think I asked a question earlier, Fidel. I don't know if you remember it, but I can reiterate it. I can remind you of it. But Reverend, any comments to what has been said so far?
Oh, I'm really excited about being in the presence of these young sons. And any help that I can give, I'll be willing. I remember the last time I was with Al Sharpton in Cornell West and Akbar Muhammad, and we went to Ghana, what they call the Door of No Return, El Mino Castle. And it was there that we saw W.E.B. Du Bois's house with his library. And the interesting thing, brothers, when we came out of the castle, because that's where I gave Cornell West a copy of the original African Heritage Study Bible. And we cried inside of the El Mino Castle. But the interesting thing, when we came out, there were some young people who said to us, "We don't know what happened to you all when you got to the shores of America. Is there any way you could hook us up?" And I have been in touch with Kwame Nkrumah's daughter or granddaughter, and I got a friend of mine, Brother Don, out of New York, and we're going to set up a Kwame Nkrumah Martin Luther King Library. We're going to be asking a lot of Black people in America, when they die, their books just sit. And we want to be able to have a movement where all of the history and the legacy of our people needs to have it shipped back to Ghana. Martin Luther King got blown away with his deep-seated relationship with our beloved brother, Kwame Nkrumah. So much so that when he came back to Dexter Avenue Baptist Church in Montgomery, Alabama, if you have not read it, please read it, brothers. It's called The Birth of a New Nation. That sermon is the most powerful sermon because it opened up his, what we call the raison d'etre, his reason for being inside of the liberation movement. My role as one of his disciples is to be able to send our books back into the homeland so that generations yet unborn will have the correct history and what we call the moral authority to do what we did and move with the level of communication with technology. I got a personal friend of mine that's working with the AU right now. His whole strategy is that we don't need to have other people wire up Africa when we can do it from the Black hand side, where we have our own tech strategy for carrying and protecting our information that was given to us from our ancestors. And we have to maintain the purity of that history. You all know right now down in Florida, they're shutting down Black history. 20 some odd states are moving to shut us down as if we don't have no kind of history, no kind of legacy.
Okay.
And that's why I appreciate this opportunity, and I appreciate you all being who you all are at this moment in time, because I'm 85 years of age. I'm asking God for another 100 years so I can complete my responsibility, because this is a perfect moment in time for me, and I appreciate Shiloh being a part of and allowing me to open, in church, they say open the doors of the church. I'm so happy that Shiloh has opened up the doors for our ability to do what we're doing today. This is better than a football game and better than the basketball game. God bless you all. I love you all, and thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Before we close out, Fidel, I don't know if you have had any studies or any information regarding Dr. King's work in any other African country as of yet, aside Ghana.
Yeah, so in the opening of this great conversation, you mentioned Libya, where Reverend Samson accompanied Dr. King to Libya,
To
and
Gaddafi, yes.
to we have Nigeria, where there were some connections, and other places in Africa. However, there's this other thing that I picked from Reverend Samson that I'd like to talk about, and it's the fact that there's so much to read and there's so much to know that we don't know. And that is very important if this library in Nkrumah Luther King or Dr. Luther King and Nkrumah Library is established. It would help so much so that that connection, in fact, the name alone will ring a bell that there's some connection, or there was some connection between freedom fighters on the continent, on the continent of Africa, and in North America or in the United States. And that will then tickle the curiosity of young people to investigate more.
Yes.
Recently, I joined a conference in Dominican Republic, and I was supposed to speak on security issues. And among the things I raised was the fact that in my research, I realized that many of the countries in the Caribbean do not have embassies in Sub-Saharan Africa.
Yes.
The best they do is to establish embassies in North Africa, and a couple of them in North Africa. But Sub-Saharan Africa, where the history is really strong, they don't. And currently, countries like Turkey and other emerging countries in the Middle East, like I'll have to ask permission from my co-panelists to mention the Middle East for the last time, and countries like UAE, Saudi Arabia, and others are rather making inroads in Sub-Saharan Africa with embassies, spread, investment, and our brothers in the Caribbean are doing none of that. That needs to be established, because this discussion is modern discussion that should actually bring out socioeconomic opportunities of this relationship.
Yes.
Currently, the US does not have to go through this civil rights and voting rights because they are already established. What we need is our brothers being part of the economic journey of Africa, which in any case has so much promise. Despite the security issues and all that, Africa is really doing well. If you mention 20 countries that are the fastest growing in the world, African countries dominate. And so, we should look at recently in Uganda, they found huge oil. Uganda is now growing above 12%. That, I mean, no European country is going 5%. So that is very significant. And we need the expertise, the kind of education that our brothers have received in the diaspora to join in order to grow together, because I mean we have the same destiny. So I think that should be established for the mutual benefit of all of us.
Wow. I was going to ask for closing remarks, but if it feels like these are the closing remarks. I mean, you guys have laid it all within. Yes, Brother GAMARIYAHU, go ahead. So it is 5:41. We have 4 minutes to end the discussion. So, Brother GAMARIYAHU, please go ahead with your comment. And in that, please give us your closing remarks. We'll take then we'll take Reverend R's closing remarks, and then we'll end with you, Fidel. Please go ahead.
I'll be brief. I want to thank the other panelists for what they shared with all of us, including myself, in edifying us further on these topics. And I would close borrowing a quote that Dr. King familiarized, but was actually penned originally by James Russell Lowell. And it really speaks to the fact that God is on our side. And the quote is, truth forever on the scaffold, wrong forever on the throne. Yet that scaffold sways the future, and behind the dim unknown standeth God within the shadow, keeping watch above his own. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Reverend Al.
I think what everybody needs to remember is what I call the triangle. The two fingers up here represents the motherland. And then when you come down, that's Africa. And then you come down with blacks in America. And then the two fingers, the two thumbs, is the Caribbean, Canadian, relationship of our people. And we have to have the triangle. And the triangle has to have an educational and economical and family, because we are the original people. We were here because God planted us here. And that's the genius of Shiloh. We're not going back. We ain't never left. In the name of the God of our ancestors, let's look at ourselves as the triangle. God bless.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, so I would say that if you look at the 20th century, Dr. Nkrumah and Dr. King were among the greatest Africans that influenced the current scheme of things and how our thoughts and where we are supposed to go, where we came from and where we are supposed to go. And so the two men came at the right time and they did what was right. And we have to learn and not forget the kind of courage and the kind of ways God spoke through them to affect our lives as Africans. Thank you.
Amen.
We have done very powerful shows. We've had very powerful conversations on this platform, but I must admit, this one hits different. This one hits in a way that empowers me in particular. And I hope that those who have listened and tuned in this evening and folks who are going to watch after this episode on YouTube or Facebook and even on Spotify will see the power that has been emitted out of this conversation. And we pray and we hope that this will be a power that would lift up mindsets here in the diaspora and on the continent, would liberate our people, and it will be a wind that fulfills the dreams and the aspirations of our ancestors. Long live all of them, from Martin Luther, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., to Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, to Patrice Lumumba, to Nyerere, to even Reverend Samson, because you were part of that movement. You were part of that struggle. We pray that God gives you long life, and we pray that he gives us, the young ones, the wisdom and guidance and the strength and protection to keep this work going. We see light at the end of the tunnel. Actually, we see the light now. And so we are confident. We're confident that it is done. Thank you so much, my great panelist, Reverend Samson, the one of the only three pastors that was ordained by the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King himself. Thank you so much for your wisdom and your submission this evening. My brother, GAMARIYAHU, the founder of Tri-State Community Development Group. On another day, we'll have you here to dive into your organization, what you do. This conversation just began with you. We really appreciate your submission, your brilliance, and your contribution. Thank you so much for coming. And then my brother in Ghana, FIDEL OWUSU, for the love of Africa and the diaspora. You stayed up late through all the technical conditions to give us a great submission. We look forward to hosting you again. We want to make this a permanent guest so we can come and look at other issues. So once again, thank you so much. And I want to thank my brother and co-host for the series that we're doing, the Shiloh production of the series on every Sunday on the Progressive Mind Show. Dr. Jonathan Brown, thank him for coming on, and we know that your mom is taken care of because we are praying to Jehovah and he's taking care of her. Also want to thank Christina King, president and founder of the Shiloh Institute, who is doing great work raising ethical leaders around the world to be advocates for communities in which they live in. Ethical leaders is the key word. We stand for peace. Shiloh stand for peace. Here, everywhere, for everyone is Shiloh's mantra. Thank you, gentlemen, once again. And I'd like to go to my audience, all of you that joined us, those who were not able to come, and thank you so much. We really appreciate it. Remember, to whom much is given, much is required. This has been your host, Senna, aka Alinko. We shall be here coming Tuesday for another enlightenment of the African diaspora. and to the African community. Gentlemen, enjoy the rest of your evening. It's been a pleasure. Bye-bye.
God bless.
God bless.
God bless.